The yellowed envelope slipped from between two tax folders, landing on my feet like a bomb. Congratulations from the University of Southern California. My heart stopped as I read the date. 4 years ago. A full scholarship. Everything paid for. Everything I'd ever dreamed of. I stared at my mother's desk drawer where I'd found it while looking for last year's tax documents, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Downstairs, I could hear my family laughing, preparing for my sister Melody's graduation celebration. 4 years of believing I wasn't good enough for any college. 4 years of rebuilding my life around that rejection. 4 years of watching my sister shine while I stood in the shadows. And now, this letter changed everything. Mom needs the 2023 tax forms for Melody's financial aid applications, my father had told me earlier that morning. Would you mind digging them out while we pick up the graduation cake? I'd agreed without thinking twice. That's who I was in our family, reliable Anya. Always helping, never complaining. At 22, I still lived close enough to help my parents with practical matters, while my brilliant sister Melody completed her undergraduate degree with honors. The home office was exactly as it had always been. Neat stacks of paper, organized folders, my mother's precise labeling system. I found the tax section quickly and began thumbing through the folders. That's when I noticed another folder marked Anya, school tucked behind everything else. Curious, I pulled it out. Inside were 4 unopened envelopes from 4 years ago, all from universities I'd applied to. USC was on top, its emblem bright and official. With trembling fingers, I opened it, already knowing from its weight and thickness what I would find. Dear Anya Walker, we are pleased to offer you admission to the University of Southern California with a full academic scholarship covering tuition, room, and board. The room began to spin. I sank into my mother's office chair, staring at the letter dated 4 years ago. 3 more letters spilled out. Acceptances from UCLA, UC Berkeley, and Stanford. All with varying scholarship offers. All hidden from me. My mind raced back to that devastating spring when I was 18. I'd applied to 7 universities with my 4.2 GPA and extensive volunteer work. My test scores had been excellent. But day after day, no acceptances came. My parents had looked at me with pitying eyes. Not everyone is meant for college, honey, my mother had said, patting my hand. You've always been more practical than academic. Not like Melody. What about community college? I'd asked through tears. Why waste time? My father had replied. Your Uncle Jack needs help at his tech startup. You've always been good with computers. It could be a real opportunity. And so it had been. 4 years of working my way up through my uncle's company, believing I hadn't been good enough for higher education. 4 years watching Melody excel in the academic world I thought had rejected me. I was still staring at the letters when I heard the front door open. Anya, did you find those tax forms? My mother's voice floated up the stairs. I walked down slowly, letters clutched in my hand. She was arranging cupcakes on a platter, her back to me. What are these? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her smile freezing when she saw what I was holding. Where did you get those? The color drained from her face. In your desk, hidden behind the tax folders. I struggled to keep my voice steady. Were you ever going to tell me that I got into USC with a full scholarship? She set down the platter carefully, smoothing her hands on her apron. Anya, you have to understand. Understand what? That you lied to me? That you let me believe I was rejected from every school? We were trying to protect you, she said, not meeting my eyes. Protect me from what? An education? A future I worked for? The front door opened again, and my father walked in, carrying a large graduation cake. His smile disappeared when he saw my face and the letters in my hand. John, my mother said quickly. Anya found the university letters. His eyes darted between us. Those were supposed to be in the attic storage. The confirmation of their deliberate deception hit me like a physical blow. So you both knew. You both decided to hide these from me. My father set down the cake and ran a hand through his graying hair. It wasn't like that, Anya. We had to think about the family as a whole. What does that mean? My mother sighed. You know how sensitive Melody is. She was struggling with her applications that year, when your letters started coming, and with such generous scholarships. You were worried it would overshadow her, I finished, the realization washing over me. So you decided my future didn't matter. That's not fair, my father said. Melody needed confidence. You've always been so independent, so capable. So I didn't need college? I didn't deserve the opportunities I earned? My phone rang, interrupting the confrontation. Melody's face flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Your sister's calling about the party tomorrow, my mother said, her voice taking on an edge of desperation. Please, Anya, this is her special time. Don't ruin it for her. I looked at both my parents. These people I'd trusted my entire life. Did you ever think about my special time? The one you stole from me? You've done so well at Jack's company, my father argued. Everything worked out for the best. I laughed bitterly. That's how you're justifying this? By pretending you did me a favor? I turned to leave, but something made me pause. I walked back to my mother's office and searched the folder again. There, I found what I suspected. A stack of follow-up communications from USC, including information about orientation, housing assignments, and academic advising. At the bottom was a form my mother had filled out, redirecting all university communications to my parents' email instead of mine. When I returned downstairs, I held up the evidence. You didn't just hide the acceptance letters. You actively maintained this lie for years. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. We need to talk about this, my father finally said. But not now. Not with Melody's celebration tomorrow. Of course, I replied, my voice hollow. It's always about Melody, isn't it? I walked out, ignoring their calls to come back. In my car, I finally let the tears come. 4 years of my life built on a lie, 4 years of believing I wasn't good enough. And tomorrow, I was expected to smile and celebrate my sister's academic success as a path I'd been deliberately prevented from taking. I drove to my small apartment, the one I'd been proud to afford through my own hard work. Now, everything felt tainted. I spread the acceptance letters across my kitchen table, reading each one completely. Dreams that had been stolen from me by the people I trusted most. My phone buzzed with text messages from my parents, begging me to understand, to keep quiet for Melody's sake. I turned off my phone and stared out the window into the gathering darkness, trying to imagine who I might have become if I'd been allowed to follow my own path. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for Melody's backyard graduation celebration. I almost didn't go, but some stubborn part of me wanted to face my family, to look them in the eyes knowing what they had done. I arrived early, helping to arrange chairs and set up the buffet table. My mother kept shooting me nervous glances. Are we okay? She whispered when we were alone in the kitchen. No, I said simply. We're not okay at all. Guests began arriving. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandparents, and Melody's friends. My sister made her grand entrance wearing her graduation cap, soaking in the applause and congratulations. She'd always been the family star, her academic achievements celebrated at every opportunity. I hung back, observing the family dynamics with new eyes. There's our Anya, my grandmother said, pulling me into a hug. Still working at that computer job? You know, it's never too late for community college, dear. Anya's doing just fine, my father interjected quickly. Not everyone needs college to be successful. Some people aren't built for academics, my mother added with a practiced smile. Anya's always been more of a hands-on learner. I bit my tongue, remembering all the times I'd heard variations of this theme throughout my childhood. Melody was the smart one. I was the practical one. Melody was academically gifted, while I was good with people. These roles had been assigned early and reinforced consistently. My mind wandered back to elementary school. I'd come home proudly clutching a perfect spelling test, only to have it set aside when Melody announced she'd been selected for the gifted program. In middle school, my first-place science project was barely acknowledged during the dinner where we celebrated Melody making the debate team. By high school, I'd learned to downplay my achievements, knowing they would never receive the same recognition as my sisters. Uncle Jack arrived late, giving me a warm hug. "There's my favorite niece," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, the one keeping my company running smoothly. "Jack, please," my mother said with a tight smile. "Today is about Melody's achievement." "Of course it is," Uncle Jack replied, winking at me. "But I've got some news that might interest Anya. The IPO is moving forward, should be happening within 3 months." My parents exchanged confused glances. Financial matters had never interested them much, beyond managing the household budget. "What does that mean?" I asked. Uncle Jack smiled. "It means those stock options I gave you when you started might actually be worth something, potentially quite a lot of something." Before I could ask more questions, Melody clinked her glass for attention. She stood in the center of the gathering, radiant in her accomplishment. "I have an announcement," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "I've been accepted to Harton's private graduate program for international relations." The crowd erupted in applause. My parents beamed with pride. "It's very competitive," Melody continued, "and quite expensive. But Mom and Dad have always taught us that education is the most important investment." Everyone turned to my parents, who looked simultaneously proud and slightly uncomfortable. "We're still figuring out the financial details," my father said. "These private programs don't offer much scholarship money. We'll find a way," my mother added. "We always do when it comes to education." The irony of her statement hit me like a slap. Later, as everyone was enjoying dessert, the conversation shifted to Melody's graduate school costs. "Those private universities charge a fortune," my aunt commented. "The whole family will need to pitch in," my mother said, glancing meaningfully in my direction. Now that Anya is established in her career, I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment away from the performance. As I walked through the house, I overheard my mother's voice from the living room where she was showing some relatives Melody's academic awards. "Anya just wasn't college material," she was saying quietly. "We tried to encourage her, but you know how it is. Some kids just aren't academically inclined. Not like Melody." I froze in the hallway, the familiar hurt washing over me, but now tinged with something new, anger at the deliberate deception. Instead of returning to the party, I wandered into my grandparents' guest room where they were staying for the weekend. On the dresser sat their old family photo album. I flipped through it absently, looking at generations of family gatherings. Near the back, I found photos of my mother and her sister, my Aunt Carol, as teenagers. Finding some family history? I turned to see my grandmother in the doorway. "Just looking," I said, closing the album. She walked over and reopened it to the page I'd been viewing. "Your mother and Carol were so different. Your mother was always jealous of Carol's academic achievements. Carol got a full scholarship to college, you know. Your mother never quite forgave her for that." I stared at my grandmother. "I didn't know that." "Oh, yes. It caused quite the rift. Your mother ended up skipping college altogether, said she didn't need it." She patted my hand. "That's probably why she's always been so supportive of Melody's education, making sure history doesn't repeat itself." Except it had repeated, I realized. My mother had redirected her old jealousy, ensuring her academically successful daughter received every opportunity while hiding those same opportunities from me. The pattern had continued into another generation. "Are you coming back to the party, dear?" my grandmother asked. "In a minute," I replied, still processing this revelation. When I returned to the celebration, I saw everything through new eyes, not just my parents' deception, but the generational wounds that had shaped our family dynamic. It didn't excuse what they'd done, but it helped me understand the broken patterns I was caught in. As the party wound down, Melody cornered me by the gift table. "Mom and Dad said you might be able to help with my graduate school tuition," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Since you're doing so well at Uncle Jack's company." "Did they?" I replied neutrally. "It would mean so much to me," she continued. "This program is my dream, just like USC had been mine." I wondered if she knew about the hidden acceptance letters. The way she shifted uncomfortably made me suspect she might. "I'll think about it," was all I said, watching her expression carefully. For a brief moment, guilt flashed across her features before she hugged me quickly and moved on to thank other guests. As I drove home that evening, I wondered how many family secrets were still buried, and how many more would surface in the coming months. 3 months passed, in a blur of intense work. The pending IPO created a frenzy of activity at Uncle Jack's technology company, where I'd risen to become Director of Customer Relations despite my lack of a college degree. My natural ability with people and problem-solving had made me invaluable to the growing company. "Anya, we need those client testimonials for the investor prospectus," Jack called across the open plan office, "the Williamson account especially." "Already compiled and sent to legal for review," I replied without looking up from my computer, "and I added the Norton data you wanted." Jack stopped by my desk, lowering his voice. "This IPO wouldn't be happening without you, you know. Your customer retention strategies transformed our growth metrics." I smiled, appreciating his recognition. Since discovering the hidden acceptance letters, I'd thrown myself even more intensely into my work. My relationship with my family had become strained and distant, brief text exchanges, and declined dinner invitations. "The stock option paperwork needs your final signature," Jack continued, sliding a folder across my desk. "Make sure you understand what these will be worth when we go public." I'd been with the company since its early days, accepting stock options as part of my compensation when cash was tight. I'd never paid much attention to them, focused instead on doing my job well. Now, according to the projections, those options would be worth over $2 million. "Are these numbers real?" I asked Jack when I reviewed the documents. He grinned. "If anything, they're conservative. The interest from the big investment firms has been stronger than we anticipated." 2 weeks later, I sat in stunned silence as the opening bell rang, and our company's shares began trading on the stock exchange. Jack had flown several of us early employees to New York for the occasion. We watched the electronic boards as our stock price climbed throughout the day, exceeding even the most optimistic projections. By closing bell, my stock options were worth nearly $4 million. "Congratulations, millionaire," Jack said, clinking his champagne glass against mine at the celebration dinner. "Any big plans for the money?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I'm not sure yet. Maybe finish my education?" "Good for you," he said sincerely. "Though I hope you'll stay with the company. You've got a future in executive leadership if you want it." Back home, I met with a financial advisor recommended by Jack. She helped me understand my new financial reality. After taxes and setting aside a significant portion for investments, I would still have more money than I'd ever imagined. "Have you considered finishing your degree?" she asked as we reviewed my financial goals. Many executives complete their education later in their careers. "Actually, I've been thinking about that," I admitted. "I was accepted to USC 4 years ago with a full scholarship, but circumstances prevented me from attending." I didn't share the full story, but the memory of those hidden acceptance letters still stung. Now, with financial independence, I could finally pursue the education that had been denied me. I began researching USC's continuing education programs, feeling a sense of reclaiming something that had been taken from me. My phone buzzed with yet another call from Melody. She'd been reaching out frequently since news of the IPO had made local business headlines. I let it go to voicemail, as I had with the previous 5 calls. The voicemail notification appeared moments later. "Anya, it's Melody again. Please call me back. It's important. Mom and Dad are being impossible about my graduate school tuition, and I really need to talk to you about, helping out." Call me, okay? I deleted the message without responding. My parents had also increased their contact attempts, casual invitations to dinner that never mentioned our unresolved conflict, comments about family loyalty, and most recently, direct inquiries about my new financial situation. As I was considering whether to respond to any of them, another call came through. Uncle Jack, the vultures circling yet? He asked without preamble when I answered. What do you mean? He chuckled without humor. Family has a way of suddenly remembering how much they love you when you come into money. Trust me, I've been there. They've been calling, I admitted. Listen, Anya. His voice turned serious. I've never interfered in your relationship with your parents and sister, but I've watched how they've treated you over the years. Don't let them guilt you into anything you'll regret. After hanging up, I checked my email and found a message from my father with the subject line, Family Financial Planning. Opening it, I discovered a detailed spreadsheet outlining Melody's graduate school expenses for the next 3 years, my parents' mortgage balance, and proposed family vacation costs. At the bottom was a note. As we've always taught you girls, family supports each other. Now that you've had this blessing, we know you'll want to share it with those who have always supported your dreams. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Not only had they never supported my dreams, they'd actively sabotaged them. And now, they expected me to fund Melody's education and their lifestyle without so much as an acknowledgement of what they'd done. A text came through from my mother. Dad and I are hosting a family dinner this Saturday. Everyone's so excited about your good news. Please come. We have a lot to discuss. I typed my response carefully. I'll be there. And yes, we do have a lot to discuss. It was time for a long overdue confrontation. Saturday evening arrived with a sense of impending storm. I dressed carefully, professional, but not flashy. Nothing that would suggest I was flaunting my new wealth. As I drove to my parents' house, I rehearsed what I wanted to say, trying to balance the hurt and anger with clarity about boundaries going forward. The house was filled with familiar scents of my mother's cooking. Melody's car was already in the driveway, along with my grandparents' sedan. A family gathering, then, not just my parents. My mother answered the door with an overly bright smile. Anya, we've missed you so much. She pulled me into a hug I didn't return. In the living room, my father and grandparents rose to greet me. Melody sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up briefly, her expression unreadable. There she is, my father boomed. Our successful businesswoman. Dinner was a strange performance, everyone talking about neutral topics while avoiding the elephant in the room. My mother kept refilling wine glasses and steering conversation away from anything financial. Finally, as dessert was served, my father cleared his throat. Anya, we wanted to have this dinner to discuss some important family matters, he began. My mother quickly pulled out a folder. We've put together some thoughts on how your fortunate situation can benefit the whole family. She slid several printed pages across the table. The first was titled, Walker Family Financial Plan. Below were itemized sections for Melody's graduate school tuition, my parents' mortgage payoff, a family vacation home, and retirement accounts for my parents. We're so proud of your success, my father continued, as I stared at the document. And we know you'll want to ensure your sister has the same educational opportunities you've had. The irony of his statement made me look up sharply. Beside me, Melody shifted uncomfortably. The same opportunities I had? I repeated. Well, you know what we mean, my mother interjected quickly. You've been so blessed with this business opportunity. Now Melody needs support for her academic journey. I thought back to all the times they had prioritized Melody's education, the expensive SAT prep courses, the private college counselor, the campus visits across the country. Meanwhile, I'd been told to be practical, to lower my expectations, to accept that college wasn't for everyone. Before we discuss any financial arrangements, I said carefully, I think we need to address something else. I reached into my bag and pulled out copies of the USC acceptance letter and the other universities' offers I'd found. I want to talk about these. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's expression hardened. Melody suddenly became very interested in her dessert plate. "What are those?" my grandmother asked, reaching for the papers. "These are acceptance letters from 4 universities, including a full scholarship to USC, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Letters that were hidden from me 4 years ago. Letters that would have changed my entire life. My grandmother looked confused as she read the USC letter. "But I thought you didn't get into any schools?" "That's what your parents told us." "That's what they told me, too," I replied. But it wasn't true. A heavy silence fell over the table. "Anya," my father finally said, his tone condescending, "you're taking this out of context. We made the best decision for everyone at the time. How exactly was denying me a college education the best decision?" "You were always so independent," my mother said, as if that explained everything. And the timing was difficult. Melody was struggling with her confidence about college applications. "So you sacrificed my future for hers," I finished. "That's not fair," Melody interjected. "Mom and Dad were just trying to balance things." I turned to look at my sister. "Did you know about the acceptance letters?" Her hesitation told me everything. "You knew," I said, the betrayal cutting even deeper. "All this time, you knew they hid my college acceptances, and you said nothing." "I found out later," she admitted quietly. "After you'd already started working for Uncle Jack, and you didn't think I deserved to know the truth?" "It was too late by then," she argued. "You were already doing well at the company. What would have been the point of upsetting everyone?" I looked around at my family. My parents avoiding my eyes, my sister defensive, my grandparents confused and dismayed. "The point," I said slowly, "would have been honesty, respect. Acknowledging that you collectively altered the course of my life without my consent." "You're being melodramatic," my father said dismissively. "Look how well everything turned out. If you'd gone to USC, you might never have gotten those stock options." "That's not the point," I insisted. "You took away my choice. You lied to me for years." "After everything we've done for you," my mother said, her voice rising, "we raised you, supported you, loved you, and this is how you repay us? By dredging up ancient history when your sister needs your help?" The familiar guilt trip might have worked before, but something had shifted in me. "What exactly have you done for me? You deliberately held me back. You told me I wasn't college material. You made me believe I'd failed when I'd actually succeeded. We gave you a roof over your head, food on the table," my father countered. "That's the bare minimum of parenting," I replied. "It doesn't give you the right to sabotage my future." Melody stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to get out of helping me with graduate school." "Not everyone gets lucky with stock options, Anya. Some of us have to work for our future through education." "Lucky?" I laughed incredulously. "I've worked 60-hour weeks for 4 years to help build that company, and I did it believing I had no other options because of what our parents did." "You always were jealous of me," Melody snapped. "Just because I was better at school, you're inventing this whole victim story." I pulled out my phone and showed her the email redirection form our mother had filled out. "This isn't a story. This is evidence of a calculated deception." My grandmother reached over and took my hand. "Anya, I had no idea. I don't know what to say." My father's expression had turned cold. "I think we need to be clear about where we stand," he said. "Families support each other, period. Whatever happened in the past, we're asking you to step up now." "After what you did," I replied, "you're still expecting me to fund Melody's education and your retirement?" "We expect you to remember who you are and where you came from," my mother said tightly. "Family obligations don't disappear because of one misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated in disbelief. "You deliberately derailed my education and lied about it for years." My father stood up, his expression hard. "Anya, you need to make a choice right now. Either you're part of this family with all the responsibilities that entails, or you're not. There's no middle ground here." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped our family for generations. If being part of this family means accepting abuse and manipulation, then maybe I don't want to be part of it, I said quietly. My mother gasped. Melody rolled her eyes dramatically. You don't mean that, my father said. You're just being emotional. I stood up, gathering my things. I've made myself clear. I won't fund Melody's education or your retirement until there's genuine acknowledgement of what was done to me and a sincere apology. If that means I'm not part of the family anymore, that's your choice, not mine. As I walked to the door, my mother called after me, You'll regret this, Anya, after everything we've sacrificed for you. I turned back one last time. The only thing you sacrificed was my trust, and that's something money can't buy back. Driving away from my childhood home, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The family I thought I had never really existed, but for the first time in my life, I was free to create my own path forward, unburdened by their expectations and manipulations. The weeks following the confrontation were surprisingly peaceful. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, somewhere without family memories. The silence from my parents and Melody was broken only by occasional texts from my grandmother checking on me. She at least seemed genuinely troubled by what had been revealed. On my therapist's recommendation, I finally applied to USC's continuing education program. When I visited the campus for the first time, walking among the historic buildings and lively student gatherings, I felt a bittersweet pang for what might have been. But the admissions counselor was encouraging about my application. Your professional experience is impressive, she said, reviewing my resume. And these letters of recommendation from your colleagues are excellent. The fact that you were previously accepted with a scholarship works in your favor as well. 2 weeks later, I received my acceptance. This time, I opened the letter myself, savoring the moment that had been stolen from me years ago. Classes would begin in the fall, and I would balance my education with continued work at Jack's company. Proud of you, Jack said when I told him my plans. Though selfishly, I'm glad you're not leaving us entirely. We were having dinner at his house, something that had become a regular occurrence since the family fallout. Jack had been divorced for years with no children, and he seemed to enjoy having someone to mentor. Can I ask you something personal? I ventured as we sat on his deck watching the sunset. Why did you never have a closer relationship with my parents? Jack swirled his whiskey thoughtfully. Your father and I were never particularly compatible, even as kids. But the real rift came when I started my first business. I asked them both to invest a small amount. They declined, which was fine, but then spent years making comments about my get-rich-quick schemes and unstable career choices. When the business succeeded, suddenly, they were family again. That sounds familiar, I said. I've watched how they treated you over the years, he continued. Always minimizing your achievements, always elevating Melody. I tried to counterbalance it where I could without overstepping. Is that why you offered me a job after the college rejections? He nodded. I suspected something wasn't right. Your grades and test scores were excellent, but I never imagined they'd actually hidden acceptance letters. He shook his head in disgust. Though I can't say I'm entirely surprised. As summer progressed, I began to build a new life, independent of my family's influence. I made friends with future classmates during USC orientation events. I joined a book club and a hiking group. I volunteered as a mentor for first-generation college applicants, helping them navigate the complex application process that had been so deliberately obscured for me. Working with these students sparked an idea. With my financial advisor's help, I established a small scholarship fund for students who faced unusual obstacles to higher education. I named it the Second Chance Scholarship, for students who needed another opportunity to pursue their dreams. I'd like to fund 5 scholarships annually, I told the financial advisor, covering tuition and expenses for students who might otherwise fall through the cracks. That's generous, she replied. May I ask what inspired this particular focus? I shared a condensed version of my story, watching her expression shift from professional interest to genuine concern. Unfortunately, family sabotage is more common than people realize, she said when I finished. Your scholarship could make a real difference. As the summer ended and my courses were about to begin, the attempts at contact from my family escalated. My mother left tearful voicemails about family unity. My father sent formal emails addressing me as if I were a business associate who had failed to fulfill a contract. Melody alternated between angry texts accusing me of abandonment and pleading messages about her graduate school dreams being crushed. I maintained firm boundaries, responding only to direct questions and ignoring emotional manipulation. In therapy, I was working through the complex grief of losing the family I thought I had while accepting the reality of who they actually were. Then came a series of messages from extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all expressing concern about my abandonment of my parents and sister in their time of need. It seemed my family had been sharing their version of events widely. We're hearing that you promised to help with Melody's education, and then cruelly changed your mind, my aunt wrote. That doesn't sound like the Anya we know. I didn't respond, recognizing the triangulation tactic for what it was. But the misrepresentations stung. My family was actively damaging my reputation among relatives, while positioning themselves as victims of my success. Uncle Jack confirmed my suspicions when he called one evening. Just a heads up. Your parents have been telling everyone who'll listen that you promised to pay for everything, and then heartlessly withdrew your support. They're painting quite the picture of family betrayal. I sighed, unsurprised, but still disappointed. And of course, they're not mentioning the hidden acceptance letters or anything else they did. Of course not, Jack said. That wouldn't fit their narrative of sacrificial parents and ungrateful daughter. Later that week, I received an official-looking envelope. Inside were loan documents, indicating my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house and a personal loan, both with high interest rates. A sticky note in my father's handwriting was attached. Expenses incurred in anticipation of your assistance, due dates approaching. The blatant financial manipulation made my stomach turn. They had deliberately created a financial crisis, assuming I would swoop in to rescue them rather than let them face foreclosure. It was their most desperate tactic yet. I called my therapist for an emergency session. They're trying to force my hand by creating a financial emergency, I explained, showing her the loan documents. This is financial abuse, she said firmly. They're attempting to make their financial decisions your responsibility, but they are adults who made these choices without your agreement. But if they lose their house, that would be the consequence of their actions, not yours, she reminded me. Your parents are counting on your sense of guilt and obligation. Breaking that pattern is part of establishing healthy boundaries. I knew she was right, but the weight of familial expectation was heavy. That evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, thinking about the scholarship students I'd be helping. I couldn't help wondering if I was being selfish by not helping my own sister. Then I remembered the hidden acceptance letters, the years of diminishment, the deliberate derailing of my education, and the complete lack of remorse when confronted. My family had made their choices. Now, I was making mine. My phone rang, an unknown number. Thinking it might be from the university, I answered. Anya? It's Grandma. I'm calling from a neighbor's phone because I didn't want your parents to know. We need to talk. 3 days later, an unknown number called my phone. Thinking it might be my grandmother again, I answered quickly. Anya? You need to come to Memorial Hospital right away. Your father's had a heart attack. My mother's voice was tight with panic. Despite everything, I felt a cold rush of fear. Is he okay? I asked, already grabbing my car keys. They're running tests. Please hurry. I broke several speed limits getting to the hospital. At the emergency room reception, I was directed to the cardiac care waiting area. My mother and Melody sat huddled together on uncomfortable plastic chairs. They looked up as I approached, relief visible on both faces. What happened? I asked, slightly breathless from running. He collapsed during breakfast, my mother explained, her eyes red-rimmed. The paramedics said it might be a heart attack, but we're still waiting for the doctor. I sat across from them, the familiar family dynamic temporarily suspended by crisis. We waited in uncomfortable silence, the beeping of hospital equipment and murmured conversations of other worried families, the only sounds. Finally, a doctor appeared. "Mrs. Walker, your husband is stable. It wasn't a heart attack, but rather an episode of severe anxiety causing chest pains. We'd like to keep him overnight for observation and stress testing, but he should make a full recovery." The relief was palpable. My mother thanked the doctor profusely, then turned to me with an expression I'd seen many times before, the look that preceded an emotional manipulation. "He's been under terrible stress lately," she said pointedly, "worrying about finances, about losing the house." I said nothing, recognizing the familiar pattern even in this setting. "Can we see him?" Melody asked the doctor. "Briefly. He needs rest." My father was propped up in a hospital bed, looking pale but alert. His eyes widened when he saw me enter behind my mother and Melody. "Anya, you came." His voice was weak, but I detected a note of satisfaction. "Of course I came. I thought you had a heart attack." "They said it was stress," my mother interjected, "from all our financial worries." I noticed my father glance at her, the briefest exchange of looks that confirmed my suspicion. This health scare, while perhaps not entirely fabricated, was being weaponized to pressure me. "The doctor says you'll be fine after some rest," I said neutrally. "If we still have a house to rest in," my father muttered. The trap was set, but I wasn't falling into it. "I'm glad you're okay. I should let you rest now." As I turned to leave, my mother grabbed my arm. "You can't just walk away again. We need to talk about what's happening to this family." "Mom, this isn't the time or place," I said quietly. "When is the time? You won't answer our calls. You've abandoned us when we need you most." Her voice rose, attracting glances from hospital staff. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I'll wait outside." In the hallway, I texted Uncle Jack. "At hospital with Dad. Not serious. They're using it to pressure me about money." His reply came quickly. "Classic manipulation. Stay strong. I'm here if you need backup." I had barely put my phone away when Melody emerged from the room, her face flushed with anger. "This is all your fault," she hissed. "I had to drop out of the graduate program because we can't afford it. Dad's been working overtime to try to cover the second mortgage they took out. Mom's selling her jewelry, and you're living it up with your millions. They took out that mortgage without consulting me, Melody. They assumed I would pay for it. Because that's what family does," she practically shouted. "You think you're the only one who ever had dreams? I worked just as hard for that graduate program as you did for those college acceptances. The difference is, you got to pursue your dreams. Mine were deliberately sabotaged by all of you." She shook her head dismissively. "Ancient history. One little mistake, and you're punishing all of us indefinitely. Hiding 4 college acceptance letters and maintaining that lie for years isn't one little mistake. It was a deliberate choice that altered my entire life." Our argument was interrupted by the arrival of our grandparents and 2 aunts. Word of my father's hospitalization had spread quickly through the family network. "Anya, thank goodness you're here," my grandmother said, hugging me. "Family needs to come together in times like these." Over the next hour, more relatives arrived. The waiting room became a family reunion of sorts, with my mother at the center, updating everyone on my father's condition while strategically emphasizing the terrible financial strain they were under. I noticed the glances directed my way, the whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. The family narrative was clearly established. Ungrateful daughter refuses to help struggling parents despite newfound wealth. Uncle Jack arrived late in the evening, his presence a welcome buffer against the family pressure. He took me aside, speaking quietly. "Your father's bank called me today," he said. They're trying to refinance the loans he took out, using their connection with our company as leverage. What does that mean? It means they're getting desperate. The first payment was due last week, and they missed it. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. So they're using Dad's health emergency to force my hand before foreclosure proceedings begin. Jack nodded grimly. I'm guessing that's part of it, though the stress is probably real enough. Financial desperation does that to people. What would you do? I asked. I can't answer that for you, but I can tell you what I know about your parents' financial situation. What he shared confirmed my worst suspicions. My parents had been financially irresponsible for years, living beyond their means while presenting an image of middle-class stability. Melody's education had been funded through a patchwork of loans and credit cards. The recent loans had been taken out explicitly with the expectation that I would pay them off. They've been telling everyone they can about your IPO windfall, Jack continued, setting expectations that you'll be the family savior. As if on cue, my mother appeared beside us. Anya, can we speak privately? I followed her to a quiet corner of the waiting room. Your father and I have been talking, she began without preamble. We're willing to put the past behind us, if you're ready to step up and help the family. You mean pay off your loans and fund Melody's graduate school? Family helps family, she said, as if it were an irrefutable law of nature. Whatever disagreements we've had, blood is thicker than water. You still don't acknowledge what you did wrong, do you? She sighed impatiently. We made a parenting decision that you disagree with. But look how well it turned out. If you'd gone to USC, you might never have gotten those stock options. That wasn't your choice to make. And you're still not sorry. What good would sorry do now? What's done is done. We need to focus on the present crisis. A crisis you created by taking out loans, assuming I would pay them. Her expression hardened. If that's your attitude, I don't know why you bothered coming today. I came because I thought Dad was having a heart attack. I still care about all of you, despite everything. But caring doesn't mean financing your lives or accepting manipulation. News of my father's discharge the following morning spread through the family. The heart attack had been downgraded to a panic attack, but my parents continued to leverage the health scare for maximum sympathy. As relatives began taking sides, with some pressing me to do the right thing and others expressing discomfort with the pressure being applied, I realized the situation had become untenable. The half-truths and misrepresentations were damaging relationships throughout the extended family. Uncle Jack found me in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cold coffee. You look like you've made a decision, he observed. I have, I replied. I'm going to tell everyone the whole truth, all at once. Clear the air completely, he raised an eyebrow. That's going to be quite the family gathering. Can you help me set it up? I want neutral territory, and I want everyone there. He nodded slowly. My lake house, this Sunday. I'll make sure everyone knows it's important. As I drove home from the hospital, I felt strangely calm. The time for half measures and avoidance had passed. One way or another, after Sunday, my relationship with my family would be fundamentally changed. The only question was whether there would be anything worth salvaging when the truth was finally laid bare. Sunday arrived crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that normally would have lifted my spirits. I drove to Uncle Jack's lake house with a folder of documents and a carefully prepared statement. My hands were steady, but my heart raced with apprehension. The driveway was already filled with cars when I arrived. Uncle Jack greeted me at the door with an encouraging nod. Everyone's here, he said quietly. Your parents, Melody, grandparents, aunts, uncles, even a few cousins. I've set up the great room for your presentation. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The buzz of conversation died as I entered. My parents sat stiffly on the sofa, Melody beside them with a defiant expression. Around them, the extended family created a loose semicircle, their faces showing various degrees of curiosity, concern, and judgment. Thank you all for coming, I began, moving to the front of the room. I know there's been a lot of confusion and hurt feelings recently, and I've asked you here today to clear the air completely. About time, my father muttered. I placed my folder on the coffee table. I'm going to share some information that most of you don't know. I'm not doing this to hurt anyone or assign blame, but because the half-truths circulating through our family have created misunderstandings that are damaging all our relationships. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Anya, is this really necessary? Family matters should stay private. They stopped being private when you started telling everyone I abandoned the family in a time of need, I replied calmly. Please, just listen. All of you. I began with the discovery of the hidden acceptance letters, passing copies around the room. I explained how I'd believed for 4 years that I'd been rejected from every college I'd applied to, how that belief had shaped my identity and choices. I showed them the email redirection form my mother had completed to ensure no communication from the universities would reach me. As understanding dawned on their faces, I continued with the story of my work at Uncle Jack's company, the IPO, and my sudden wealth. I detailed my parents' financial decisions, the loans taken out with the expectation I would pay them, the pressure to fund Melody's education, the ultimatum that followed my refusal. When I discovered the truth, I explained, I didn't ask for compensation or revenge. I simply wanted acknowledgement of what had been done, and a sincere apology. Instead, I was told either to pay for everything without question, or consider myself no longer part of the family. The room was completely silent. My grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. One of my aunts stared at my mother in obvious shock. That can't be the whole story, my Aunt Patricia finally said, turning to my parents. Sarah? John? Is this true? Did you really hide Anya's college acceptances? My father cleared his throat. We made what we thought was the best decision for the family at the time. Anya was always more independent, and Melody needed the confidence boost of being the academic success. The room erupted in murmurs. My cousin Tara, who had always been close to me, stood up angrily. You deliberately sabotaged her education, and you're not even sorry? It was a long time ago, my mother said defensively. And look how well it turned out. If she'd gone to USC, she wouldn't have those millions now. That's not the point, my grandfather said, his voice cutting through the noise. You altered the course of her life without her consent or knowledge. That's not parenting. I don't even have words for what that is. Melody stood up suddenly. You all don't understand the pressure I was under. Everyone expected me to succeed, to be the smart one. If Anya had gone to USC with a full scholarship, while I was struggling to get into state schools, she trailed off, perhaps realizing how selfish she sounded. So you knew? My grandmother asked, her voice tight with disappointment. You knew they hid those letters from your sister? Melody looked down. I found out later. But by then, what was the point of telling her? It would have just created drama. The point, my cousin Tara interjected, would have been basic human decency. As the family processed this information, my father attempted to redirect the conversation. None of this changes the current situation. We're facing foreclosure. Melody had to drop out of her program. We need help. Actually, I said quietly, that brings me to the second part of what I wanted to discuss today. I explained my position clearly. I would not simply write blank checks to people who had betrayed my trust so fundamentally and showed no remorse. However, neither did I want to see my family suffer unnecessarily. I'm prepared to offer help, but with conditions, I said. First, I'll pay for financial counseling for my parents to address the underlying issues that led to this crisis. Second, I'll establish an education fund for Melody that pays her tuition directly to the school, not as a blank check. Third, I'll contribute to a structured debt repayment plan for my parents, matching what they pay themselves dollar for dollar. I looked directly at my parents and sister. But these offers are conditional on a full acknowledgement of what was done to me and a sincere apology, not just privately, but to everyone who's been told I abandoned the family. I need to know that you understand the gravity of the betrayal and that it will never happen again. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to my parents. My father's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. My mother looked trapped, her usual manipulations ineffective in the face of such complete transparency. To my surprise, it was Melody who spoke first. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice small. "I should have told you when I found out about the letters. I knew it was wrong, but I was selfish. I liked being the successful one. I liked that they were proud of me instead of you." Her unexpected honesty shifted something in the room. My Aunt Patricia moved to sit beside my mother. "Sarah," she said gently, "it's time to make this right. Your daughter is offering you a path forward." My mother looked around the room, perhaps seeing for the first time how others perceived her actions. I didn't think it would hurt her so much," she finally said. "She was always so capable, so independent. We thought she'd find another way." "That's not an apology," my grandfather pointed out. My mother took a shaky breath. "You're right. Anya, I'm sorry. What we did was wrong. We had no right to hide those letters or lie to you for all these years. I can see now how much it hurt you, and I am truly sorry." My father remained silent, his jaw clenched. "John?" my grandmother prompted. After a long moment, he sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, too. We shouldn't have interfered with your future that way. It was wrong." I studied their faces, trying to gauge the sincerity behind the words. They weren't perfect apologies, but they were a start, the first acknowledgement of wrongdoing I'd heard from either of them. "Thank you," I said simply. "I appreciate that." The conversation continued for hours, with other family members asking questions and offering perspectives. Some, like my grandparents, were firmly supportive of my position. Others still thought I should let bygones be bygones and help without conditions. But by the end, there was at least a shared understanding of what had actually happened, free from the distortions that had been circulating. As people began to leave, my cousin Tara hugged me tightly. "I'm so sorry about what happened to you," she whispered, "and I'm so proud of how you handled it today." 1 year later, I sat in USC's auditorium, waiting for my name to be called at the honors ceremony. My first year in the continuing education program had exceeded all expectations, with my professional experience complementing my academic studies perfectly. In the audience sat Uncle Jack, beaming with pride. Beside him, more surprising, were my parents and Melody. Our relationship remained a work in progress, but the foundations had been rebuilt on more honest ground. The financial counseling had revealed the full extent of my parents' mismanagement, decades of living beyond their means while maintaining appearances. The structured repayment plan I'd helped establish had saved their house from foreclosure, while teaching them financial responsibility for perhaps the first time in their lives. Melody had returned to graduate school with a clearer purpose, the education fund ensuring she could complete her studies without the pressure of crushing debt. Our relationship had thawed gradually, occasional coffee meetings evolving into genuine conversations where we both acknowledged the unhealthy dynamics that had shaped our childhood. Anya Walker, Departmental Honors in Business Administration, the dean announced. As I crossed the stage to receive my certificate, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also freed me from patterns I might never have recognized otherwise. I had created a life authentic to my values and abilities, not defined by family expectations or limitations. The Second Chance Scholarship was now supporting 10 students annually, helping others overcome obstacles to education. Working with these students had become one of the most rewarding aspects of my life, transforming my personal pain into something constructive. After the ceremony, my family approached somewhat awkwardly, still finding their way in our reconfigured relationship. "We're proud of you," my father said, the words clearly still unfamiliar on his tongue when directed toward me. "Thank you," I replied. "That means a lot." My mother handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph of me at 18, on the day of my high school graduation. To remember where you started, she said quietly, and how far you've come, despite everything. It wasn't perfect. They would never be the parents I had once wished for, but they were learning to be better versions of themselves, just as I was. Later that evening, at a small celebration dinner, Uncle Jack raised his glass in a toast. To second chances, he said, and to the wisdom to know when to give them. I smiled, thinking of how different my life looked now compared to a year ago. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something constructive, boundaries that protected without isolating, forgiveness that acknowledged without forgetting, and a future built on my terms. The greatest lesson hadn't been about money or education, but about authenticity and self-worth. No success was meaningful if achieved through manipulation or deceit. No relationship was healthy without honesty and respect. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to insist on the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. As I looked around the table at the complicated, imperfect people who were my family, I felt at peace with my choices. The betrayal had changed me, but I had refused to let it define me. Instead, I had used it as a catalyst for growth, transforming pain into purpose and building a life that honored my own values rather than others' expectations. That, I realized, was the true measure of success. Have you ever discovered a betrayal that changed your life path? What did you do? Forgive unconditionally, set boundaries, or walk away completely? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your authentic path. And don't forget to share with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to create the life you deserve, even when it means making difficult choices.